Hello there, I'm John and welcome to another art tutorial from Shopkeep Arty, providing both short and more in-depth art classes that help inspire, educate and entertain you in the company of leading artists and teachers from around the world. Today we're going to be painting alla prima, or wet on wet, a landscape scene using water mixable oils with a wonderful professional artist from the Philippines, Babao. Iris was originally a piano major who developed a passion for watercolour and soft pastels. She's affiliated with the International Watercolour Society of the Philippines, as well as the Philippine Guild of Watercolourists and the Philippine Pastel Artists. She's also a very generous teacher and it's always a joy to host her. As you'll probably know by now, these short 1 hour classes are a prelude to the artist's longer 2 to 3 hour paid for workshop in a few weeks' time. And it gives you a good taster of some of the things that Iris is going to be teaching in greater depth at that full event. Back to this short class, although you can just watch, we recommend speed painting along as it's the best way to learn. It can feel fast and furious, but it's guaranteed fun nonetheless. Then between now and the longer workshop, you can reflect on what techniques you want to expand upon in the workshop, as we have loads of time to go on various tangents and focus on specific learnings while creating a wonderful artwork step by step. So without further ado, let's zoom to Iris now. As we journey to the Philippines, the link to view recommended materials and reference pictures can be found in the description below or on our website shopkeeparty.com. Visit our video library. As we zoom in, I can see there's Iris's house, there's her studio. Hello, Iris.
Hello, John. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be back with you, and for our 8th show, can you believe? Our 8th show
Yes.
together. It's amazing, isn't it? Now,
Right.
I had a question for you, just to get a little bit political. I'm just very curious to know, obviously in the Far East and the Philippines and everything, is there much press about the Ukraine and Russia situation? Is there much news about it, or what's the general...
Yes, yes. We're all tuned in, of course. We're all very disheartened about what's happening, and we just really hope for the best and that everything will be resolved soon. Obviously, everyone is affected. Everyone around the globe is affected, not just Europe, not just Russia, but of course, everyone is affected with that
Yes, yeah, no,
happening.
it's a difficult situation, but yeah, it's good. It sounds like it's on, because you don't really know in different countries, especially in different extreme parts of the world. You don't quite know whether it's having the same. It's obviously on our doorstep, but no, it's really, really interesting. Well, I can't wait to dive into water mixable oils as a bit of a change. But before we do, a quick 30-second word on how today's live event's going to work. So first of all, we're going to walk through the prep, and this might include talking about the process, which will include maybe the sketch, some theory, applying the first layers. Then we're going to take a pause around midway and use it as an excuse to see some examples of Iris's previous works of art for a bit of inspiration. And we'll also discuss the upcoming 2 to 3 hour workshop webinar next month. And then finally, we'll complete the tutorial, after which, whether you're watching live or watching the recording, you can share what you've done at home on your Facebook or Instagram page for comments and feedback. So with introductions done, let's get back to Iris, and we're going to start putting paint to canvas and make a start. So back with you, Iris. Let's maybe give an overview of what we're going to be doing today.
Right, okay. So we'll be doing a landscape today, and it will be in water mixable oils. So I just want to talk a bit about water mixable oils because there's some, word goes around that some say it's not real oil. It actually is real oil. It's the same as your traditional oil in tubes. The only difference is they've added something to it that makes it water mixable. But once it dries, it dries with the same exact finish as that of a traditional oil. In fact, you can even mix both. You can mix your traditional oils with your water mixable oils. The only difference is that if you do that, you won't be able to rinse your brushes anymore with water, or you won't be able to thin your paint anymore with water. Now, the reason why I got into water mixable oils is because I do have health problems, and I have a studio that's very small with absolutely no ventilation. So I have my aircon on the whole time I work here, so it would be really impossible for me to work with turpentine or solvents or stuff like that. So I've shied away from using oils. But when I tried water mixable, I had no issues with it. There is one difficulty that a lot of beginners experience when they do start with water mixable, is that they feel that the paint becomes too sticky. Now, the reason that happens is when you put too much of the water into your pigments, into your paints, there will be a certain drag. The consistency of the paint won't be as good as if it was straight out of the tube. So what I normally do and what I advise those who take a class with me is that you treat the water just as a way to rinse your brushes. So when you go from color to color, in oil, we're very careful with the pigment that we have in our brush. We want to keep our colors as clear, as clean as possible when you transition from color to color. So in traditional oils, normally you would dip your brush in Gamsol or an odorless solvent. And that starts giving me problems. So in water mixable oil, all you have to do is you dip your brush in water, rinse it with water, and then with a glove, just protect yourself. Of course, you need a glove. And then lint-free tissue. I always use lint-free tissue. Every time you dip your brush in water, make sure that you completely dry it. You remove the water, because the water will act as a thinner. So whenever you have any paint on your canvas and you get your brush with water and you paint it on your canvas, you're going to remove that paint, because again, water will act as your solvent. So make sure that every time you rinse your brush, you clean your brush, remove the water, and then dip it in your medium. So my medium is a water mixable linseed oil. So this is by Holbein. So make sure you also use water mixable, so that you don't lose the water mixability of your paints and your mediums. So I dip the brush in a little bit of medium, just to be sure that the tips of the brush is coated with medium, which is oil, and not coated with water, because it's the water that's really going to give you trouble. So the only time you use water is during the initial stages when you want to thin it down. So you think of your water as your turpentine or as your solvent or your Gamsol, okay? But for me personally, I don't even use it like that. I really just thin down the paint with my medium. I spread the paint with a brush, and I just use water mainly to clean my brush in between colors, shifting colors, and after the session. So that's all. If you do it that way, it's really going to make a huge difference in your work. You will not find any difficulty with water mixable oils. It won't be sticky. It won't dry dull. It will give you the finish and the luster and the longevity of traditional paints.
Wow, what great tips. And I to be honest, I hadn't thought about the situation, obviously in hot countries, having the ventilation issues with regards to normal oils. I'd not really thought about that, but it makes total sense. So I would imagine in certain less well ventilated countries or in hot climates, there probably isn't as much oil used.
Well, there are a lot of oil artists here. So many are very, very good with it. Although they had to deal with those problems of the toxic things that they breathe in, especially if they have a studio that's not well ventilated, or they do paint outside where they have to deal with the humidity and the heat and all. So those things we can do away with that. And it's not just us. A lot of professional artists are also trying to go solvent free. Even if you use traditional paints, I also use traditional paints, but instead of using turpentine or solvents or Gamsol or mineral spirits to clean my brushes during and after the session, I use safflower oil. It's another type of drying oil, but it dries longer. So, if you're into oils, I just want to stress that oil can clean oil. So you can clean your brushes with safflower oil, and you won't have any difficulty with it at all.
which I believe there may be a bit of a shortage at the moment of sunflower oil with the Ukrainian crisis as well, because a lot of it comes from there. But
Yeah.
that's a topic for another day, I think. Now, we've had a question from Karen Knight as well. She said, I can see you can buy a medium to make oil paint water mixable. Do you know if that works?
That's true. I tried that. I tried the one from Schminkma. Yes, it works. The only issue is that you really have to prep ahead of time. You have to, before your session, you have to prep each and every pigment that you're going to make and make sure that it will be water mixable before you start your painting at all. Because it's such a hassle if, in the middle you realize that you haven't mixed enough medium to make it water mixable. That might be, too much of a hassle. So just prep ahead of time, and it will work. Yes, it does work.
Okay, perfect. Right, so now we're going to crack on and make a start.
Okay, so I started with a filbert brush. I'm using a synthetic filbert brush, and I just dipped it in a bit of linseed oil, very little. Okay, so the thing is, you just really have to manage the amount of medium that you use with your paints. Little medium. You need very little medium. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch the landscape. I'm just going to put the line where we separate the water from the air, from the sky, and then I'm also going to sketch in where the land formations will be. So it's basically you're just giving yourself a guide as to where the big shapes will be. So the thing in landscape is you look for the big shapes first. You establish where the big shapes are. You look for the smaller shapes as well. And don't look into the details yet, because especially if you're painting plain air, or if you're looking at the reference photo, there's too many details, and you might get confused if you really look into the details. Just try to get the big shapes down first. And as you do that, so you go from big shapes to small shapes. And what I normally do with landscape is that I just make sure that I know what colors I use in terms of color temperature. So you want to make sure that anything that is further from you has cooler temperature, and anything that is nearer to you has warmer temperature. So warm colors and cool colors really play a big role, especially in landscape painting. And also anything that is further from you will have fewer details, and anything that is near you will have greater detail. So in any painting that you do, you really want to make sure that you have a plan in mind already. It's difficult to go into a painting and just say, I'll come up with what I come up with, especially with oil, because it's very easy for oil painting to become muddy and to become very cool, because every time you mix titanium white with your colors, it has that natural tendency to cool down your colors. So if you notice in my palette on the left side, if you look at we sent you a link, a guide on the exact colors that we use. But the ones on the left you will see is yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon, and then cadmium yellow. So I mix titanium white with those warm colors to create a warm white. So I don't normally dip in straight into white. I use white sparingly. In fact, I try to use the purest white when I'm already near the end of the painting, because that will be your whitest white. So you want to make sure that you have an area of contrast where you have your lightest light and your darkest dark. So again, I refrain from putting in my lightest light until the very last stages of the painting. So if you notice on the first row, those are the colors that came straight out of the tube. So that's yellow ochre, cadmium lemon, cadmium yellow, vermilion hue, alizarin crimson, what's the next one? Cadmium red, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, sap green, viridian, and then burnt sienna, raw umber, and Payne's gray. So I don't normally use black. So what I'm going to do now, or what I'm actually doing right now, is I dip my brush again in linseed oil, and I'm sort of prepping the surface, because you'll notice that sometimes it's difficult to allow your pigments to spread on the canvas. there's sort of a drag to it. So when you prep it a bit with linseed oil, the paint just glides on more smoothly, especially if you use paints that are sort of stiff. What I'm using now is Holbein. I'm very happy with Holbein. I use a mix of Holbein, Cobra, Daniel Smith, and I also have Jackson's, a few tubes of Jackson's water mixable paints. Now the ones from Holbein tend to be a bit stiff. So for me, it's much easier if I have a big area to cover. I try to prep that a bit with just very little linseed oil. And you'll notice that once you lay in the pigments to your brush, it just glides more easily. It just really glides like butter. But again, make sure that you do it in moderation. So try to use a brush that you can really work into the canvas. Don't use your sables yet. Use your filberts, your hog brushes, the ones that you can really abuse. You don't feel that you're going to destroy the fiber and all. So get one that's really sturdy, and get one that you can really use to spread the paints and the mediums. So right now, this is I'm just laying in some pigments with the ultramarine blue and the cobalt blue, which is mixed with titanium white. So again, on the bottom row, you will see it's the exact same pigments on the top row, except I mixed it with titanium white. So that's a tint already of the main color. That way, you have a lighter version of your main colors. Now, I don't normally do this when I do a painting, but for demo purposes, I just did that so that you can already see how the colors will be once it's mixed with titanium white, and it will also become faster for me. So everything that I've recorded, I've recorded this on real time, so that if you want to paint along, you can. I did not speed up. I did not cut any parts here. Although, of course, I pressured myself to be able to finish this in 45 minutes. But if you do,
you didn't allow for any time in the middle, though, Iris. So
gosh, yes.
No, but that's fine. I've got a couple of questions. So Sandra's asked, what kind of canvas do you use? Is it a regular gessoed canvas?
Okay. I use two types. One is a gessoed canvas, a store-bought canvas. But when I use that, I make sure that I add a couple more coats of gesso, because I like a smoother surface. So again, that would depend on you, if you want a rough surface or a smooth surface. But for me, I do a lot of detailed painting. So I find that if I have a smoother canvas, it's much easier for me to work on. And then I also use MDF board. So the one here in the demo is an MDF board, and I coat it with GAC 100. You can look at that. It's a sealer. It's an acrylic primer, actually, but it can also seal your surfaces, because MDF boards will absorb a lot of moisture so that it doesn't warp. I first seal it with GAC 100, and then I coat it with 3 to 5 thin coats of gesso. And I'm really very careful with the way I coat my gesso, my boards and my canvas with gesso.
Okay. And Karen's asked, do you always paint on a canvas board, or can you use oil painting paper or something like that?
Yes, you can also use paper. I've used paper. I've used even sketchbook paper. As long as you coat it with gesso, you can also use that for for oil. So there's many surfaces. You just have to make sure that, number one, you render the surface non-absorbent, because if it's too absorbent, it's really just going to suck in all of that pigment and all of that oil, and you'll end up with patches that are really very dry and very dull.
It's all about priming it with the gesso up front, then, whatever
that really helps a lot. That's right. So right now you'll see that I'm very careful where the blue and the yellow meets, because of course blue and yellow will make green, and you don't want that in your sky. So I'm being very careful where I lay down that blue and that yellow. And then later on, I'll show you how I gently blend in those two colors in such a way that it's blended, but it doesn't create tones of green. So when you see me dragging the brush across the board or across the canvas, there's, if you were to see it live, there's actually almost no sound, meaning it's being dragged very, very lightly. It's like only the pigment is touching the pigment. When you do your oil painting, especially when you're doing alla prima, because you're doing it in one go while the painting is wet, you have to be sure that you don't drag the brush in such a way that you just remove the paint that you placed. So make sure that you do it with a light touch. Make sure that every time you move from color to color, you really clean your brush. In fact, some artists even designate, a brush for warm colors and a brush for cool colors. That saves them time from cleaning. But if you do, I don't have the luxury of that. I don't have as many brushes. So I just make sure that I clean my brushes as I shift from color to color. And so now you'll see that I'm dragging the paint from the blue portion down to the salmon colored portion. So that will give me a soft edge and a good transition, but that doesn't drag my color everywhere. So you'll see every time I drag that brush, I wipe that brush on the tissue to make sure that I don't pick up a color and transfer it to somewhere I don't want to. Because in oil painting, sometimes the thing that most beginners do is that they have this concept that they just keep on brushing, lay color over color. But the more you do that, the more you create mud. And especially when you're in your focal point, you want to make sure that those areas have the highest chroma, because you want to maintain that high contrast and that high chroma. So you want your colors to be very vibrant, and to keep it vibrant and to keep it clean. You just have to make sure that you don't drag your colors where you don't want it to be. Because again, you're working wet on wet. So it's so easy to muddy up your colors, because you can easily drag your yellow to your blue, your violet to your yellow, and make mud. So when you do this, you just have to make sure that you have your color theory intact. Your complementary colors. When your complementary colors fix, create mud. So just keep those in mind. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in now the underpainting. So you will notice that the sky is basically done. Okay, so what I do when I do alla prima and when I do direct painting is I try to get the thickness of the paint the way I would want it to be. I don't try to do so many thin layers and then go back and forth, because I want that sky to be dry enough later on when I add the birds, or when I add some of the greens, the trees. So I try to make sure that I have this time frame. So I do the sky, and then I do the water, and then I sort of calculate that, okay, after 30 minutes to about an hour, that part will be dry, so I can do more details. So I guess, a lot of people have a difficulty with alla prima because they say, it's too wet, you cannot manipulate the paint anymore. But it's really all about planning, getting the colors down, getting the pigment as thick as you need it to be, allowing it to dry just in time for that portion when you're going to add the details on top of it. Okay, because if you add it when it's too wet, it will be too slippery and you really won't be able to get much details. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm laying in the mountains in the background. So you'll notice that the colors that I used is a dull down green. So because the mountains are in the background, it's far from us. So of course you don't want to introduce any warm colors for that. That's why I'm using a dull down green. So that's a sap green with a bit of viridian and also some gray. The paints gray, I mix that with a bit of white, a titanium white, to give me a cool gray. So I'm also laying in the shape of the trees. Now in this stage, don't think about the details yet. You just want to lay in a color. And what I'm trying to do is I'm putting in the darker colors. So in oil painting, I go dark to light. So I preserve the lighter colors for the later stages of the painting. So you want to put in your mid value and your dark values before you put in your lights. That's how I approach it. And then one thing that you also want to be aware of and conscious of are the edges. Edges are very, very important. Whether it be landscape or portrait or still life, you want to have a good balance of hard and soft edges. Now, especially if the object is far from you, the mountains are far from you, these trees are far from you, you want edges that are softer. So it sort of blends into the background, it sort of melts into the background. And that also gives you a very atmospheric feel. In painting, for me, one of the really important aspects of painting for me, and one of the things that really attracts me to a painting when I see one, is if there's a certain mood to it, if there's a certain atmospheric quality to it. So that's one of the things I really try to achieve, whether I do florals or still life or landscape, even portrait. So you just want to be able to create that mood. So now I'm laying in the colors of the water, and you will notice that I'm still using the dull down colors. Okay, nothing vibrant, nothing too bright yet. So I'm also laying in some lilac here. Now the lilac color here, I mixed that with the ultramarine blue and the alizarin crimson, and then titanium white. So that will give you a very nice lilac color. And I'm spreading it at that portion of the water because you want to be sure that anything you see in your sky, anything that you see in the land will be reflected in the water. So what I'm doing is I'm just laying down the middle value colors, okay, not the darkest darks and not the lightest lights. And from there, you will add your highlights and you will add your darker colors. So again, this is still just a filbert brush, a synthetic one. And you will see that I drag the colors horizontal and vertical. So anything that is reflected on the water, it appears more realistic if you lay it down vertically. And then for the ripples, you do it horizontally. So a mix of both horizontal and vertical strokes work really well for water reflection. And you have to remember also, one thing that I always stress is that anything that you see on the reflection will always be of lesser value, of lesser contrast, of lesser chroma. Okay, so if you see a very bright sky, the reflection will not be as bright. The reflection in the water will not be as bright because, of course, you have to take into consideration if there's the mud, on the water, that will affect the color of the water. Any stones, any pebbles, that will affect the color of the water. Like also, if you have a very bright tree, you painted the tree bright green, the reflection should also not be as bright. So it would be of lesser chroma. And if the tree trunk is dark, on the water reflection, it will also not be as dark. In the same way, if the sky is bright, very bright, on the water, it will also not be as bright. So just remember that it will always be less in the water reflection. Also details. A lot of beginners, put too much detail in the water reflection. Of course, it should not be as detailed as the real thing because you would have the water and you would have the ripples, and that would, of course, distort the shape and the form of what's being reflected on it. So now I'm laying in the darks. So this is Payne's Gray. And then for me, it's very helpful to lay in your darks because when you have your darks there, especially if you want to create high contrast, when you're already in the portion where you have your focal point will really shine and your light will really shine only if you have the darks in place. Otherwise, there won't be any contrast and you really won't be able to play up the light. And for me, light really plays a big role in painting. Again, for any subject, it's always that play of light and shadow that really draws my attention to any painting that I view. And most of the ones that I admire really have a good play of light and shadow. So as you lay in those darks, you'll be able now to gauge, how bright you can go and how dark you can go. Again, reserve your brightest brights and your darkest darks till the very end of the painting. That's because that's if you look at it, that's the furthest that you can go. If you want to amp up a certain image, you amp it up with adding a very bright highlight. But if you overuse those whites in the middle stage, you have nowhere to go. You would have to dull down everything else so that you can go really bright. So, the best way is just to keep your brightest brights and your darkest darks until you're very sure as to the direction of your painting. When you're happy with your values, when you're happy with your colors, then that's a time for you to add in your brightest brights and your darkest darks. Okay, so now I'm going back to the sky. So this is what I was telling you about. So I have allowed that portion of the sky to dry a bit. So this time I can now lay in some more cooler colors. So I'm adding some lilac colors here to create some shadow, of course, to add a bit of drama to the sky. But if I did this earlier, I wouldn't be able to drag my brush in such a way that I'm able to retain texture because the paint would be too wet. One other benefit I would like to mention with the water mixable oil, or maybe because the paint that I use is a bit stiff, it doesn't have too much oil content. And it's also a lot of artists have also experienced this and observed this, that water mixable oil dries faster than traditional oils. So that's you can see that that's a bonus. Now, if you still want to further speed up the drying of your paint, there's a medium that you can add, which is a quick dry medium. So that's both available with traditional oils or water mixable oils. But again, if you're using water mixable oil, make sure that the mediums that you mix in your pigments and in your mediums are all water mixable. So again, if you want to speed up the drying, you can add a quick dry medium to your mediums, and that will cut your drying time in half. So here
now,
again,
Sandra is thanking you for all your tips, Iris. I told you all that Iris was a very giving teacher. She's brilliant. Sandra's also asked a question. She's been doing a bit of research on materials for water soluble oils, and she said that she can see that Holbein has a 10 color beginners set. Do they have a difference between the student and professional? Do you know what the difference might be?
I have not come across a student line for Holbein. For Cobra, there is. They have a student line and an artist line. Now, I would suggest that you always go for the artist grade line. You might say that it's more expensive, but you have to remember that the pigments in the tube are loaded. So it may come in a bit more expensive, but it will last longer. So for me, it's actually cheaper, and it gives more vibrant colors.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing that you might want to consider, of course, when you do any type of painting, whether traditional or water mixable, the fiber of the brushes really play a very important role. So what I use when I'm in this stage when I want to blend the sky, especially the sky, it's sometimes very hard to create really soft strokes for the sky. If you'll notice, what I'm using here is a synthetic mongoose brush. So just look for a brush that is sort of short. The fiber should be short, stubby, splayed, meaning it's not compact. It doesn't have a sharp edge. It's not gathered to a fine point. You want something that's spread out, but soft enough. So this will be good for blending. So what I'm basically doing now is I'm blending. So I go between that lilac color and that blue color, and I soften that edge. So it's always important to know where you want to keep your edge soft, where you want to keep texture. It comes with practice and it comes with experience. Sometimes as artists, we are tempted to over detail everything, because you spend a lot of time preparing your drawing, preparing your sketch, and you feel like, I want to put detail everywhere, but, try to hold back on that, because, the most effective paintings, even the most effective photos, when you take a look at it, there's one object, you zoom in on one part of the painting that really has high contrast, high chroma, high detail, and everything just sort of blurs into the background and supports the main focal point. So that's always one thing that I make sure I'm in control of when I do any type of painting with any type of medium. Okay, so you notice I dipped in my brush into a titanium white, but I did not lay it in very thick because I don't want my brightest bright yet. Okay, nothing really bright yet. So even if I put in my whites there, I make sure that I blend it in so that I get that transparency. The nice thing with oil is that the more thick you lay it on your canvas, the more opaque it will be. So the white will be more opaque, the thicker you put it on. In fact, I've also told my students, when you reach that part when you glaze, wait a week and then add your whites. You'll see that you get, an added punch to your white. You can get it even brighter. So that's the one thing to remember. Also, another thing to remember, especially for those who are going to shop for their pigments, if you want to try water-soluble painting, make sure that you have a good mix of transparent and opaque paints, because there will be areas in the painting that you need something transparent, and then some areas where you need something opaque. Now, there's so much technical things to talk about. I won't be able to cover it here, but when we do have the longer class, I will take you through everything, opacity, strength of pigment, when to lay in the dark colors, when to lay in the light colors, how to properly mix colors. Because the mix that you see here is very straightforward, very simple. It's just the main color plus white. Okay, I kept it that simple because this is sort of an introductory class. But when we do the still life, I will talk about how to use white transparent, which might be very surprising for most, because we all know that titanium white is opaque. But there are ways to make it transparent, and I'll take you through those when we do the class, because we really need a lot of time for that. Okay, so now you notice that I'm trying to lay in now a brighter yellow. So that's the time I dipped into my cadmium lemon and added a bit of titanium white to that as well. And it's also at this stage that I'm trying to double check, okay, is this edge soft enough? Is it blurred enough? Does it blend into the background? Does it give that sense of depth to that painting? So make sure that as you go through the painting process, you step back every now and then to check if you're on the right track. If your horizon line is straight, I have a lot of students realize later on that, oops, their horizon line was tilted. So, just keep stepping away from your painting, because if you paint too near, you miss those details. So just, step away, take a few breaks every now and then, and assess and review, and always squint your eye. It cannot over exaggerate how important that is, because when you do that, you really get to see the values. You get to see if you have enough contrast, enough depth, and it really, really helps. So don't worry if you look silly, because when I was starting, I was saying I look silly if I keep squinting my eye, but you really, really need it. So see, now I'm dragging the paint downwards, so that will give me a good reflection of the trees. That gives you a good impression of the trees, and just still continuously blending and softening, and making sure that I have those reflections in place. Because when we do the highlight later in the water, it would be difficult for you to put in those shadows, because you cannot do that without messing your highlights. And if you mess your whites, when you have your whitest whites there and you mess with it, I guarantee you will end up with a cloudy and a muddy and a dull painting. So make sure that you have those values, those shadows in place before you even try to tackle your highlights.
Brilliant. It's looking lovely. It's really coming together, isn't it, right?
So this is about more than halfway. Later on I'll just show you how to put in the details, and I will also be showing you a different brush later on. So basically, up to this point, the only brushes I used are filberts, and yeah, they're all filberts. Even this mongoose, the synthetic mongoose, is also filbert. So I haven't used any pointed brushes yet, any angular brushes yet. So it's really all about laying down the colors. Okay, now I'm going to shift to, maybe we can stop midway here. You like?
Okay,
John?
okay. Right, we'll take a pause. Thank you for that, Iris. Really coming on. It's looking so wonderful. Karen said, oh, wow, Iris is so informative and great instruction. Can't wait to get mine out. So, yeah, I think Karen's obviously following along, but then we'll maybe do the video a bit later on.
Sure.
So now is a chance. We'll take this pause and we'll take this chance to have a look at some examples of other paintings that Iris has done using water soluble oils. And Iris, which examples have you pulled out for us?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I have another one here. Sorry for the glare of the light. Okay, try it.
No, that's fine.
This is another water mixable,
Yeah,
and
lovely.
it's on MDF board. And again, it's alla prima. So this was done in maybe just 3 hours or so. But a lot of my students always ask me, how can you get as much detail down in such a short time and in alla prima? So that's the technique that I want to share with everyone when we do the class. You know, is how to lay down the paint properly, how to lay it down in layers, the timing, so that when you reach, let's say, the 30-minute point, you know that you can add this or you can add that. Because if you go in blindly, you know, you just say, okay, I'll just do the sky and I'll do this and I'll do that. You don't have a plan in mind. You really won't be able to come up with an alla prima painting with as much detail as you want in a short period of time. Now, I stress alla prima because coming from a watercolor background, because I'm a watercolorist, I always like to work wet on wet. So that's always been my principle, you know, being able to work wet on wet, being able to blend seamlessly wet on wet. So here's another one, landscape also. And again, alla prima, again, water mixable oil. And you will see that here, you can see that I've reserved really my highlight here, my whitest whites here, while everything else just sort of blurs into the background. So you know that you have a focal point there. And again, you're able to put in as much detail as you want, even if it's in just a short period of time. And what we're doing on the
We'll maybe share this in a minute when we talk about the workshop. But how much of the time do you use water soluble oils? Because I know you go to soft pastels, watercolor. How much of the time would you say that you paint in this medium?
You know, I go. It depends on what I'm inspired. Like for this month, I'm oils. Then maybe next month, I'm gonna be watercolor, and then next month, I'm gonna be soft pastel.
You go in phases. You go in phases. I think that's like all of us. If you do something a lot and then you think, I want to change. I want to.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, they look lovely. They look really dreamy as well in certain things, and it really captures the light really well as well, which is lovely. And let me know in the comments which paintings stood out to you and why. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube and love what you're seeing today, we'd both really appreciate you hitting the thumbs up button. YouTube then recommends the show to more people and helps us with our mission to inspire them to give art a try, young and old alike. So now, as we were just starting to touch on it, we'll talk about Iris's upcoming workshop, which is planned for mid next month. So Iris, we're going to be doing a still life, and obviously people can see that on the website, and I'll show them when we go there in a minute as well. And it's an arrangement of objects that you've put together. And have you got a reference photo? Yes, you have, isn't there? There's a reference photo that people we can't show the original painting because people liked it so much they bought it. But you do have something that looks similar, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And maybe you can share some of the things that we'll be covering in the workshop.
Okay, so this is another still life. Okay, so again, it's going to be the similar approach or similar style, chiaroscuro, a play of light and shadow, and you know, a lot of details. And that's really what I'm excited about. You know, how I'd like to show you how you can really create a lot of detail, to the point that some people may even ask, did you do that alla prima? Did you really do that alla prima? Or did you do that in layers? Because, you know, there is a way. I want to show you. I'm excited to show you just how you can do it.
I'm excited to learn. No, that's brilliant, and yeah, it looks fantastic, and the photo, the reference photo online looks lovely as well. And will it take only 3 hours to do this painting? I mean,
Yes.
really,
Yes.
wow.
Yes.
Because
Although, of course, I will touch on, you know, okay, what can you do in 3 hours alla prima? And then if you want to further enhance it, I will also tell them what they can do to glaze, but they have to wait a week or so. But
Okay.
I assure you, if you follow the steps, even if it's alla prima, you get really good detail, really good color, and it's good as is. But however, if you're still not happy with it, if you still want to tweak it a bit, I'll show you how you can even further enhance that by glazing. But you have to wait a week. But during the class, I'm going to show you how to do that.
Brilliant, brilliant. We're going to be covering a lot of things, so I'm really looking forward to that. So as I said, it's happening next month. It's happening on the 12th of May, which is a Thursday, and it's going to be at 2 o'clock UK time. We can't really make it any later because what time is it your time at the moment, Iris?
9 p.m. my time.
Yeah, so it's 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. So we thought, much that she'd love to be painting at midnight for those of you in the US. But if you do want to pre-order the video, you're more than welcome to. Or if you want to just, on a special occasion, get up early. I find myself getting up earlier and earlier these days. I don't know why. I can't have a good night's sleep. I always think I'll have a really nice night's sleep tonight, and then I always wake up really early. Now, since it's a different medium that we usually focus on, it's going to be a really different type of workshop, as you can probably tell, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be really interesting. Spaces are limited as always for the event, and to book you can either click the YouTube pop-out link, which should appear just here, or you can visit our website directly at shopkeepart.com and you can go through and book it. And I'll just share my screen now and show you how to do that. So you visit shopkeepart.com, click on the live events menu in the menu at the top, and then scroll down and you'll see Iris's workshop a little bit further down. There we go, and that shows a picture of what we're actually going to be painting as well. Click on the see details, and this gives you the reference, the example painting that Iris has done that she sold, which looks lovely, and then the reference photo. And you could probably pull out, because some of those, there's garlic and things like that, you might be able to even you probably won't have a teapot like that, but you can maybe, if you want to get your own garlic and tomatoes, so that you've got those in front of you, that might be quite useful. Click on Iris's shop, and you can either order a ticket to attend the live event, or you can pre-order the video. And if you are ordering the live event ticket, you also can click the drop down and select the ticket plus the video at a discounted rate. Then add that to cart, and although it's in pounds, your local card issuer will convert it to your local currency after checkout. If you do purchase the video or you pre-order the video in the future, anytime, you can come to the video library page on our website, and we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows, and we list them all chronologically. But the best way to then find the particular workshop with Iris is search by artist, and then scroll down, select Iris, and then it'll show all the different classes and workshops that we've done with her. And if you've ordered the video, you can then click the watch button, the blue watch button. Also, if you want to remind yourself of the materials, you can click the class info and things like that. So hopefully that has helped. As a reminder, if you are one of our patrons, you automatically qualify for a big discount off all our workshop webinars. You simply use the link in the chat now, or visit our live events page and click the patron discount link. Over to you, Iris.
Okay, so now I shifted to a round brush. Okay, so this is a pointed round brush, but still with a mongoose type of hair. So again, it's still splayed. You see that when you dab it, so I'm not actually dragging it, but I'm just sort of dabbing it, and it automatically gives you a nice texture. So again, this is why I keep saying that, the choice of brushes are also very important. So what I'm doing now is still laying in the darker values, so that once I have my darker values there, it will be easier for me to lay in the lighter values where supposedly the sun will be hitting the trees. So now this is where I do that. So you notice that I dip my brush into sap green mixed with titanium white. So again, that's sap green mixed with titanium white. And I'm putting it on areas which supposedly will be the areas where the light or the sunlight hits it. And then now I'm dabbing into my violet color, which is a mix of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. And that will just give me a nice, cool shadow. So again, I always stress that, whether you do highlights, whether it be light colors or dark colors, you want to have a good mix of your cool and your warm colors. It really gives you a more vibrant look to your paintings when you have a warm color next to a cool color. So it's always, you know, a play between warm and cool, soft edges and hard edges, light areas and dark areas, areas that are far from you and areas that are near to you, small shapes, big shapes, shadow and light. So, you know, always look for that contrast. Okay, so still using a filbert. Okay, so this is a filbert with a mongoose type of hair, still splayed. You will notice that when I do landscapes, I usually use hair or fibers that are splayed because, again, I just want to be able to create the look of leaves, soft sky. So it will look, the strokes will look very loose, very organic. But when I do still life, that's the time that I really go into really thin, really chiseled, and really sharp edged brushes. But for landscape like this, it's really more of those soft splayed edge brushes. It gives you really a very nice brush stroke. Okay, so that's still the violet color, just still laying in those cool shadows. And then once I'm happy with that, once I've placed it all well, then that's the time that I'm going to go for my warmer colors to bring in some of that light into the trees and into the water as well. So you'll notice that I shift from horizontal strokes to vertical strokes. And I always make sure that at the very tip of my brush mark is soft, especially when we're dealing with trees and grass. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in more light. So this is cadmium yellow and cobalt blue, and I'm mixing my own green. So you'll notice that this is much brighter than the sap green that you see from the tube. The reason why I do this, some of you might say, why don't you just use the same sap green? The thing is, one of the things that people find difficult in painting greens is that they feel that they only have, one shade of green or maybe two shades of green, and they find it redundant. The thing with painting greens, and whether it be landscape or still life or florals, is that you want to have a good variety of your greens. You want to have greens that are very warm, very bright, or always almost towards the yellow. And you also want greens that are cool, almost towards the blue. So as long as you have that mix, very bright greens, yellowish greens, grayish greens, you'll be able to come up with a landscape that is interesting. You'll be able to have fun painting your trees and your grass. It's not gonna feel like it's so much green, because a lot of people say that the thing that they find difficult when they paint greens is that they cannot seem to handle the green well. So it's really just a matter of tweaking your paint, making it cooler, making it warmer, making it lighter, making it darker. Again, color mixing, we will go into that during the class.
Now, Mary Ann's asked a question talking about the upcoming workshop. She said, would the class be okay in regular oil paints, as I don't have water-soluble paints?
Yes. I will send a guide to those who will be joining. If you prefer to use regular oils, you can. In fact, my classes here, a lot of them use traditional oils, and I do that as well. But I do suggest, I will give you a list of the mediums that you can use that are solvent-free. So you can still use your traditional oils, but if you can, I would always recommend that you go solvent-free for your health. And but again, if you're comfortable with the mediums that you're using, sure, go ahead. If you work in a well-ventilated area, then there wouldn't be a problem. But for those of you who have been wanting to do oils, but you have headaches, a lot of people complain about having headaches midway. If you're allergic to solvents and terps, then I have so many things that I would like to share with you. That's going to make oil painting so much easier for all of you. Whether you do water mixable, whether you do traditional oil, or even if you want to mix traditional and water mixable, it can be done.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so now I'm just trying to lay in a darker valley for that, for the mountain and the background, just so that I have a nice distinction between where the land ends and where the water starts. And I'm going to be shifting brushes again. So this is a smaller filbert, just to soften that edge between the water, where you have the yellow and the lilac. So you'll notice that it's so easy for me to create shadows because I have a yellow and a lilac there, and those are complementary colors. So wherever I blend those two, it's so easy for me to create a shadow or a dulled down color. Again, those are one of the things that you want to make sure when you do landscape, is that you don't have an overabundance of very brilliant colors. You know, you just want it in the right places, not everywhere. In the same way that you don't want your highlights to be all over the place. So you want to keep your colors as close to nature as possible, especially if you're doing even if it's impressionism, but you want to create what you see in real life. Then you really have to be very conscious of the chroma, how you blend the colors, how to dull it down the proper way without making it muddy. There's so many ways to do it, and I would love to guide you through that. So now we're almost near the end of the painting. So this is still a filbert brush, but this time it's a synthetic filbert brush that has a sharp edge. It's gathered at the tip. So that will allow you to create really fine lines and fine details. And because it's a filbert, you can lay it on the side and still be able to create soft strokes with it. One of my mostly used brushes, I would say, would be my filberts. It's my go-to brush. I can do without a round brush, but I can never do without the filbert brush. It's really what I use. In the same way that, I can do away with flats. I can paint an entire painting without any flats, but I need my filberts. I think it's the most versatile brush, because if you use the edge, the side of it, it's like a round. If you use the tip, it's like a flat. If you put it on the side, it can work as a round. So it's very versatile. So now I am adding, you will notice that I'm adding even brighter colors to the foreground, because this one is very much near me. But I'm not using any of those bright oranges or bright pinks. So I'm keeping it to a certain extent that, yes, it will look like it's near, but it won't get too much of the attention from the focal point, which is really this portion of the sky, which is what I'm working on right now. And I'm adding some titanium white. So you'll notice, again, because of the timing, I've allowed that portion of the sky to dry already. And I can now lay in my titanium white without it being too wet, so that it doesn't really meld into the background, but I'm able to maintain the opacity of that white. And then, of course, all the colors that you see in the sky, you want to reflect a bit of that in the water. So whatever I see in the sky, I try to reflect in the water. The palette that you see here is my usual palette, whether I do still life or florals or landscape. I just want it there. I don't necessarily use all of it, but for me, like when I do alla prima like this, I just want to have my options there. So it's not as if, you don't have to get all of the colors that you see in the star. There's so many, but you just stick with maybe a good 13 colors plus your white, 12 colors plus your white and I don't use black. What I use is Payne's gray, and I warm it up and I cool it up if I need to. I'll talk about that, how to cool down and warm up your colors. And just, a good set of 12 to 13 colors. The palette that I gave is a good guide, plus a very good titanium white and a Payne's gray. And you'll be able to mix all the colors that you need from this, actually. So this one is a dagger brush, still a synthetic. I mostly use synthetics. Reason being is that when you use natural fiber hair and you dip it in water, they sort of it doesn't retain its shape. Okay. And of course, in oil painting, you really drag the brush, so you really abuse the fiber. So I find that synthetic hair, of course, is of course more nature friendly, and it will also last longer. It can stand more abuse. So that's what I used for the ripples in the water. And I'm also going back and forth on that portion of the sky, slowly adding more whites as the white dries. Um, of course, your white is slow drying. Most of the whites that you buy are slow drying. There are quick drying whites, but it's a given that titanium white really dries really slower than most. So it takes a bit of planning when you add this, and a bit of care also. Then going back to the blues, adding more shadows. So see, the blues will give you a lighter value, ripples, but it's not as white and it's not as bright as the titanium white. So you will notice that I kept my titanium white to that small portion in the sky and to the direct reflection underneath it. Okay, so that's why I was saying that you keep your titanium white to a minimum. Now with the palette knife, so that I get even thicker and an even more opaque coverage, I lay in more titanium white with the palette knife, and that will give me more coverage because it's thicker. The thicker it is, the more opaque it is, and the brighter it will be. And I'm also adding some to the water, and you'll see that it gives you a different mark because the metal is smooth. So as you drag it, it gives you that sort of that speck. You see specks of light. So that's something that you can't achieve with your brush. So it's nice to always, as you paint, you get to see what your brushes can do for you. You really have to practice, and you really have to use your paints in your brushes, and do not scrimp on your paint. There's nothing more difficult than trying to cover a painting with very little paint, because what you do is you sort of scrub and scrub and scrub your brush because you try to keep spreading the paint. And what you want is you want to have a good coverage of oil paint, because that really gives you the luminosity and the vibrance of the pigments. So you need a good coverage. So don't scrimp on your paint. It's meant to be used. So now looking at it, just trying to see where I lack shadows, where I lack some drama and all. So I dipped my brush in the cool gray that I was able to mix with my paints gray and titanium white. And again, just very lightly dragging the brush, doing circular strokes so that I get that shift in tonal value. I get a darker portion in the sky, but I'm still able to maintain the smooth blending and the smooth transition of the strokes. So we're almost done. Just a few minutes to go from here. So at this point, I'm very confident that the sky is tacky. It's not completely dry, but it's tacky. So I'm able to lay in more colors. I can sort of do a dry brush stroke with it. I'm able to blend the colors, but I don't disturb the paint underneath it, because the paint has reached that point where it's all a bit tacky already. Not completely dry, but it can resist being dragged off by the paintbrush. And you'll notice that I'm not too careful about cleaning my brush here, because specifically what I'm trying to add are shadows. So these will be the saturated colors. But when you add vibrant colors, when you add yellows and whites, that's when you really want to make sure that your brush is clean and free from any other pigment. Especially yellow. Yellow is it's high tinting, and even just a bit of yellow will really affect the color of your pigment.
Well, it's certainly been hypnotic watching you paint that, Iris. It's lovely. All the
Thank you,
colours
Tom.
at play as well.
Mm-hmm. Sky, it's very fun to paint skies because you can really play with a lot of colors.
Yeah. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed it. It's certainly been a great session as Iris just finishes that off. How did you get on? Fantastic session. A bit different today with a different medium, but I know we've had some great comments coming in from some of you. Manette said, excellent class. It's so difficult to find anyone online or in person who addresses the challenges of water mixable oil. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the full class. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Manette. And if you've got any comments that you'd like me to read through to Iris as we near the end of this show, please do write that down for me now. And also, Iris and I'd love to see what you've created from the class. The post relating to the show is already on our Facebook page, so search for Shopkeep Arty and you'll find it there, and just share a picture of your painting on there so that we can all have a look. And you may get a comment from Iris as well as a mini crit. Now, next week we're featuring a brand new artist on our channel as well, Cassia from Norway. So I'd recommend signing up for that if you get the opportunity. Simply visit our live events page on our website, or if you are already a patron of ours, you'll automatically get an invite link sent the day before, as always. Right. I'll now go back to Iris and I'll read out some of the comments. Jacqueline said, thank you, Iris, really informative. Andrew said, I don't paint oils at all, but enjoyed watching Iris painting and explaining her knowledgeable approach to painting. Sandra said, okay, so now I have not painted in oil for 40 years, but I signed up. Thank you, Iris and John. And Lenny said, oh my, I loved it. I might just have to switch to oils. Oh my goodness, you might have converted them. I can't believe it. Now, if you are on YouTube, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up, as I said earlier, and also press the notifications bell that drops down next to the side of the subscribe button, because it then notifies you when we launch a new email with a new artist as well, so you don't miss out. And if you want to join Iris for this still life workshop, which I know, I can just get the feeling it's going to be one of the greats, don't forget to book your place or order the video. Thanks again for joining us, and until next time, it's obviously goodbye from me, but thank you so much for all your time, and you give so much information. There's so much to take away. I think we could watch this over and over again and still take something new out each time. Thanks so much to Iris. Thank you very much, Iris.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And you obviously get a big round of applause. And we'll finish on the painting. Thanks, Iris. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.